Okay, before I can start this tutorial, I actually have a warning disclaimer here. Once as you try this Pro Watercolor Secret, you may just permanently boost your painting confidence. Seriously, you'll be staring at your painting saying, wait, I did this? So stick around, you are going to want to learn this trick. Now, just really quickly, before we jump into today's transparent painting technique, I do need to announce that this is actually your last chance to sign up for my Craftamo monthly watercolor classes in a box. There are literally only a couple days left before the pre-sale time period is closed, and to be honest, I don't know if they are ever going to come back again, so make sure you take advantage of this while the offer is here. Here are just a few of the boxes. I've tried to create a fun and beautiful variety of tutorials. These tutorials that come with these boxes will be at a slower pace than my weekly videos here on YouTube so that you can follow right along with me a little bit easier. And like I said, this subscription lasts for a whole year with one box coming right to your door every single month. I've had one viewer say this is just going to be like Christmas every month, and she's exactly right. Not only do these classes come with exclusive tutorials, each box also comes with an already printed out outline for the painting lesson, 2 of my personally designed Craftamo brushes, so by the end you will have 24 of those. They also come with 4 half pan paints, so 48 of those by the end, and a few of the boxes will even include some extra little gift items that hopefully will be helpful as well. Something that I think that is really fun about these 2 is that we get to do a lot of color mixing experiments with several of these boxes, and I really think you're going to love what you can learn about that. So if you're interested at all in these, my previous few tutorials have had a lot of helpful information, including showing off the brushes, some of my favorite brush strokes to do with them, as well as color swatches and info on the paints. I'll list links for those in the description of this video so you can check them out, as well as a link for the Craftamo product page so you can check out pricing, pictures, and other information. And one last side note I'd like to add, please only do this if it makes sense for you financially. You, of course, need to take care of you and your needs first, but if it helps at all, these are set at a discounted price right now, 15% off if you get the 6-month plan, which would consist of 2 total payments for the full 12 months, and 25% off if you pay for it upfront with one-time payment. And I do believe the shipping is charged on a monthly basis, so that's no matter which plan you choose, just keep that in mind. Okay, enough of that for now. I may throw out some more information as we get into painting, but let's go ahead and pull out some painting supplies and just jump right in. Now, I'm actually trying something a little different today, and I am painting on a larger piece of watercolor paper. I got this Arches pad a while back that is sized like 11.5 inch by 16.5 inch, so it's pretty different compared to the 8 by 10 or the 9 by 12 that I usually paint on. But this is a perfect project for this larger paper, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Now, as you can see, I already have my outlined flowers already on my page, so let me pull out the darker version so you can see them a little bit better. But for your convenience, I am going to have these available in my Etsy shop, so you can print these out right in your own home and simply trace them onto your watercolor paper using a light table or even just a well-lit window in your house. The good news is I am going to be including all 5 of these sketched flowers within one order, and I'm going to have these set at a 40% discount for 1 week, so make sure you take advantage of that. The fun thing about these 5 sketches is that they are very versatile in how you can use them. You of course don't have to do all 5 like I'm doing today. You can do a smaller sheet of watercolor paper and just do 2 or 3, and you can pick the ones that you like to use, and you can play around with them and how you want to arrange them on your page. In fact, you can even just paint one of these on a smaller sheet of paper and use it as a card or something. This is a fun series of flowers. You could even frame them and hang them individually. There are so many possibilities with these. You can just play around and be creative here. But like I say, I wanted to paint all 5 on this larger sheet of paper, which was actually a little bit tricky to arrange them so they actually fit. But I finally think I got it right by simply overlapping a few things. And that's actually going to only add to the fun transparency effect of the piece. All right, I'm just going to quickly finish taping my paper down to help with some of the warping, and then I think we can get started. And actually, I'm going to do one more thing here really quick. Since a lot of the paint colors are going to be fairly light in value today, I'm actually going to lighten up my pencil lines a little bit so they're not quite so prominent. All you have to do is take a kneaded eraser, which is basically a moldable eraser, and I'll roll it up in my hands to create sort of a snake or hot dog shape. Then I'll just take the eraser and roll it around on my page over the graphite. And what this does is just take off some of the loose graphite on the page, and that naturally lightens the pencil lines up without completely erasing them. If you need to, you can also dab at it as well, but you can see that as I do this, the lines that I've already rolled over off to the left side are going to be lighter than the ones on the right. Okay, I think that's just about good enough. Now for my brushes today, I am going to pull out 3 different sized round brushes that will each basically be designated different colors. I'm going to have a larger number 9, a medium number 5, and a small number 2. Then for my paints, I will be using my Craftamo paints that are going to be coming out with my subscription boxes. And like I said, 4 of these colors come with every box, but here I have all 48 colors. And today I've actually chosen to use a pretty limited color palette, so I've only picked a few of my favorites to use for this particular painting, but I did do some color swatches of all of these colors a couple of weeks ago if you'd like to take a more in-depth look at that. Now, as I'm setting up here, I'm realizing my paper is so big I can't fit the whole palette into the screen today, but I will try to say the color names as I pull them out so that you'll know what I'm using. Then, of course, I do have some clean water and a paper towel off to the side here. Okay, let's go ahead and start pulling out some colors. Now, you of course can use any colors you want to. I think these flowers would literally look good in just about any color you choose. I want to use my favorite color combination using some pink and yellow. This color is called Quinacridone Magenta, and it is so pretty, probably one of my favorites in the whole set. Now, as I get these out, I am going to be making 2 piles of this color. One that is very light and watery with very little color in it. In fact, it really is almost just like tainted or dirty water even. The ratio here is more water to paint. But then I'm also going to have another pile here that is the opposite of that, with the ratio being more paint than water. This is a nice, dark, concentrated version of the Quinacridone Magenta. And like I said, I am sort of designating a brush to a color. The larger number 9 will be with the light watery pink. The number 2 will be with the dark concentrated pink. And then I will pull out the number 5 and have this be with a yellow color. I love the color gamboge. That's what I was planning on, but as I'm pulling this out, I kind of feel like it's not quite right. So I think I'm going to try some of this cadmium yellow instead. All right, now to get into the secret tips on how to make this transparent looking watercolor technique work. The first thing we're going to want to do is take the lighter watered down pink and use it as a base color. You'll want this base layer to be nice and wet, so pull out some extra water from your brush rinse bowl if you need to. And with this technique, it helps to work a little bit quicker so that that watery paint layer doesn't start to dry out too early. It's really important to keep that evenly wet. Okay, now that I have the base layer of water on here, I'll take the number 2 round brush and some of the dark concentrated pink color and start painting that around the edge line of the wet base layer. Now, the biggest balance and trick to this technique is painting this line of color so that it touches both the wet and the dry paper. The paint that touches the wet layer is going to start to bleed and blend into the water a little ways, creating a soft edge, and then the paint that touches the side of the dry paper will form a hard, more crisp line. This is the biggest secret and tip into getting this transparent technique to work. And then for fun, or as an added optional texture to the petal, you can take a touch of this color and paint some vein lines through the center part of the petal. These are also going to blend and soften a little bit as long as that base layer of water and color is still wet, but I love what this can add. It is optional, but it's very cool. Now I'll just switch over to my number 5 brush in charge of the yellow paint color. Take a touch of that and add a little bit to the centermost part of the flower or petal and let that blend into the base layer a little bit as well. This also works the best if that base layer is still wet. That is why it is really a key point to work quickly before everything starts to dry out. This altogether creates an awesome looking petal. If you find that you're having a hard time getting everything on here before it dries, my advice would be to just focus on the light base layer of color and the darker outer edge. The vein lines and the yellow center are fun extra additions, but they're not necessary to the technique. This technique can take a minute to get the hang of, but the good news is we have a lot more petals to get through. So the goal is by the end, you will have this down like a pro. A few other things I'll mention that you might notice as I get going here are that some of my base water layers don't have a lot of pink color in there. Like I say, some of these are more like using the brush wash bowl water or something, very light in value. The light value color really just helps that darker pink edge really stand out. This can also be a benefit when we start adding in layers of petals on top of each other too. Of course, this is just a matter of preference with how much color you want on your petals, just something to keep in mind. Another thing I'll point out is that I am going to be jumping around from petal to petal and flower to flower to allow for some drying time. Before I start painting a petal that touches another, I need it to be completely dry. Otherwise, they're just going to blend into each other and you won't end up with that nice, crisp outer line. You may also notice sometimes that if I ever lift up on my brush that's painting in that dark edge color, then the paint tends to drop more and spread more in the area that I let up on. If I keep the brush on the paper and paint a nice steady line, it kind of holds everything together. There's not necessarily a right or wrong way to go about this. It's just good to know so that you can almost strategically pick a spot on the petal where you want more color to be. I kind of like to do it here and there just for a fun variation, especially on the very end of the petal to give it more of that dark color. Now, on one of the smaller petals, I actually did try to use the smaller number 5 brush to paint the base pink layer with, but I must have had some yellow still in the bristles even after I rinsed it out because it kind of created an orangey look on the petal. So I'm not going to do that again. I think I'm just going to stick to keeping my brushes and their designated colors separate. But if you need to pull out a smaller brush to paint in some of the smaller petals, then by all means feel free to do so. All right, at this point, I'm just going to keep moving on to more petals until each flower has at least a few as kind of that first initial layer. These are all going to be painted in exactly the same way, but I am going to try to throw out some more helpful information and tips as we get going. And actually, I'm just realizing, I think I forgot to mention at the beginning of this video, but you are probably aware by this point, this is a premiere video. So if you are on here live with me watching today, please let me know who I've got here with me. I'd love to hear from you and maybe even where you're tuning in from. I love hearing from all of you. It's one of my favorite things about creating these tutorials. And one last thing, if you happen to be new to my channel and you find that you're enjoying my painting and teaching style, I hope you'll subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss out on any of my new and upcoming weekly videos. I try to provide tutorials that fit a variety of skill level painters, from easy, beginner-friendly tutorials to even more advanced, so that there's something for everyone. Okay, now sit back and enjoy the painting process. All right, great job. I think that's good enough for the first layer of petals for all of these flowers. Now comes the fun, but also slightly more tricky part. We get to start overlapping the petals and create that fun, layered, transparent look. The good news is the technique is going to be exactly the same as we've been doing. We'll start again with the light wash or base layer of color, followed by the darker line of paint around the edges. And if you want the vein lines, go ahead and the yellow color in the center as well. I think the trickiest part is that it starts getting a little bit harder to follow through with some of the overlapping petal lines. There's a lot of pencil lines on the page to follow, and sometimes it can get confusing as to which ones go where. So before I give you a few tips on this, I will first say, if as you get going, you happen to paint an area or follow a petal line that wasn't the right one, don't worry about it too much. This all blends and meshes together just fine in the end, and anyone looking at it when you're done will have no idea that you followed the wrong line. Trust me on this. It really does all work out in the end. And as my good friend Bob Ross always says, there are no mistakes, just happy accidents. Now, with that being said, something I like to do is find and follow the petal and pencil line with my eyes before I ever start putting color on the page. I make sure that I have a clear plan of where I want my paint to go before I start jumping right in there. The other tip I'll give you is that you can literally just paint the flower and the petals right in the same order as me. Whether or not you're just painting 1, 2, or 3 of these flowers, I am painting all 5, so you can follow along the steps exactly as I do them. I'm trying to plan it out and paint these in the easiest way possible to follow. And one other thing that makes these layers of petals a little bit more tricky is that you don't want to smear or mess up the petal that you're painting or layering on top of. There are a few things that can help with this, and I'm realizing even as I speak that I probably should have said this at the beginning of the video, but I honestly didn't think about it until now. But the paper and paint you use can sometimes make a difference with how well this technique works. I recommend using 100% cotton paper. I've used other cheaper brands with this technique, and sometimes it just doesn't work quite as well. And as far as the paints go, some paints tend to have more of a lifting off or reactivating quality to them, and then some paints sort of tend to stain or soak into the paper more. This isn't necessarily a good or a bad thing, just something to be aware of. If you are using paints that tend to lift off or reactivate when they get re-wet, you're going to have a harder time with this layering technique because instead of a crisp line on each petal, they're going to reactivate and start to blend and blur. But either way, for whichever kind of paints you have, it's a good idea to try not to rub or work the overlapping spaces too much as you begin layering on more paints and water. This is just going to help reduce this from potentially happening. Hopefully all of that made some sort of sense. The good news for you is that if you ever want to try using these paints that come in my subscription boxes, you can see here they're working pretty well with this painting and the technique for me. And I just have to point out, aren't the colors so pretty? I just love the brightness of them and also how this color combination is looking together. All right, now, if you just happen to be tuning in for this premiere video today, I just want to say welcome. I'm so happy to have you, and I'm here in the live chat today if you'd like to tell me who I've got here with me. And just FYI, this video is sort of a last chance celebration video for my Craftamo monthly watercolor classes in a box that I'm excited to say will provide an entire year's worth of painting tutorials as well as materials. The sale is only for a couple more days and then it's going to be over. So if you're interested at all in participating, then now is the time. I'll leave a link to the product page so you can see some more information as well as pictures, and I will leave some links to some more informative videos that I've put out featuring items that come with these classes that I will also leave in the description of this video if that would be helpful to you. But for now, let's go ahead and get back to enjoying our painting. All right, I think that actually completes that second layer of petals. So let's go ahead and move on to the third layer. And I'm happy to say that this third layer will actually finish off a couple of these flowers. So we are getting close to being done. And like I say, I am painting all 5 of these for you so you can get a good idea of how each flower can look and then use this as a guide and a reference. But if you want the process to go a little bit quicker, you absolutely can just paint 1 or 2. You can also feel free to take some breaks here and there in between petal layers. We definitely need any previously painted petals to be completely dry before we start painting another layer over the top. So this is a good time to take a quick breather from the project if you need it. I'm finding that because I'm painting so many of these flowers and so many of the petals, by the time I'm done with the 5th flower, the first one is actually dry enough so I can just keep rotating and continuing on. But it's definitely something you'll want to check and be careful with. It's looking to me like a couple of these flowers will need a 4th layer in just a minute. Some of these petals are just overlapping each other a little bit more than some of the other flowers. But we'll just keep plugging away and get to that in a minute. All right, I think we are just about done here. If you've stuck with me this whole video, I know you're probably thinking I would never say that, but if I'm looking at it right, I think we can just paint the last few petals on these last couple of flowers, and then we can move on. And while we work on this, just one more quick reminder that this is the last chance to sign up for my 12-month Craftamo watercolor classes in a box, which not only includes slow-paced step-by-step painting tutorials, but you also get all of the supplies that you need to be able to paint them, including 24 of my personally designed Craftamo brushes, 48 half-pan paint colors, paper, outlines, and even a few extra little gifts in the first 3 boxes. I've tried really hard to make these worth your time and your money so that there's something that you look forward to and are excited to receive every month. And hopefully you'll learn some new painting skills along the way. All right, these look terrific. There's only one more thing I'm going to add to some of these petals. You may have noticed there are a few lines still on a few of these flowers that we haven't actually painted yet. For these last few lines, we need to paint them in, but instead of using the technique that we've been using, I'm actually just going to use a solid layer of one color into the space. So let me show you what I'm talking about here. This first flower just has a very small one, almost like a stripe or line of color that just flows through the center of the petal. I'll just take some pink paint here and simply follow the pencil lines and add some solid color in here. This just kind of changes things up a bit and adds more depth to the piece without making it look too busy. In fact, I actually think I have a spot like this on every flower, so just follow along and we'll paint all of those in on each flower. Okay, look at that. Don't those look neat? All we have to do is add in a few more finishing touches and we can call this done. Why don't we go ahead and pull out a little bit of sap green and add some stems in here? And you know what? I'm changing my mind. Maybe instead of a pure sap green, I'm going to try adding it into the Quinacridone Magenta here to make it a little bit more of a brownish green color. We do still want it to be green though, so if you get too much Quinacridone Magenta in there or it's too brown looking, just add in a little bit more green. All right, I think that's good enough. The good news is I'm actually going to be painting these stems in a very similar way with a similar technique as the petals. So using the number 5 round brush, I'll paint on a little bit of water down the stem line. Then using the smaller number 2 round brush, I'll take some of the brownish green paint and paint that along the edges of the water layer just like we did with the petals, creating a transparent looking stem. Now some of these stems do show through and underlap some of the petals that we already have painted on the page. Through the areas like this, I'm going to try to paint them a little bit lighter in value than the other spots on the stem just to give it the illusion of showing through behind or underneath the previous petal. I will also point out that even though this is how I am choosing to paint these, you can paint these stems in any way that you want to. Some options you have instead of painting them with the transparent technique are you can just paint them a solid green color instead. You also don't have to have them showing through the petal if you don't like that. If you are trying the transparent technique instead of just the water on the first layer, you could also try a light green and then add the dark green along the edges. And lastly, some of my longer stems are starting to dry out a little bit too quickly. So some of these larger ones, I'm actually going to decide to split them up into sections rather than trying to paint the whole thing all at once. So there are a lot of options here. There isn't a right or wrong way to do this, just whatever you think would look good on your painting. All right, good job. This looks great. In fact, you could just call this painting done if you like it just as it is. I'm going to be demonstrating some darker stamen lines in this painting so that you can see that as a potential option. I'm just going to darken up the sap green color a little bit more for this. I'm adding in a little bit of sepia, but that doesn't seem to be quite dark enough still, so I also might add in a touch of lamp black also. Now, using the small number 2 round brush, I'll paint some dots to form circle shapes for the tops of the stamen, and then I'll take a touch of paint and use the very tip of the brush to paint in some thin lines connecting the tops down to the center of the flower. This brush is small enough I'm able to paint in some pretty thin lines with it, but if you're having trouble with that, you can pull out a smaller sized brush like maybe a number 1 rigger instead. In fact, you could even pull out a nice thin Sharpie marker and simply just draw these on too. No one looking at it is going to know the difference, and I promise I won't tell, so just whatever works best for you. Well, I think the addition of adding the stamen centers on each of these flowers really finished off the look of this. I love how this turned out. Now, I chose not to add any leaves or grass to this particular painting today, but you could always add that into your painting later if you want to as well. But my friends, I think I'm going to call mine done for the day. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you had some fun with this. Don't forget that this is your last chance for getting my watercolor classes in a box. Go check out my product page link in the description of this video, as well as my previous few tutorials so you can see what all is included. And a huge thank you to all of you who have already subscribed for these monthly boxes. I truly appreciate your support, and I hope you love what is about to come with these. Also, if you did enjoy this tutorial, my painting and teaching style, I hope you'll consider subscribing to my channel so I can continue to help you discover your artistic side.